Being next for a lift, watching the lifter before you while the adrenaline starts to course through your body, then stepping up on the platform in front of a small crowd of strangers was fantastic. What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Twisted Barbell. My name is Marcus, and today I want to talk about some takeaways that I had from my recent competition. I'm in the big leagues. The first takeaway was getting the lay of the land, understanding your warm-up area and how you have to share it. On average, there are 30 or so competitors that you will have to share the floor space, racks, and weight plates with. For guys, naturally, you may be inclined to warm up with the men, but if your attempts are relatively light, you could come first in the men's flight. As I warmed up for deadlifts and my fellow competitors began making incremental jumps from red plate to red plate, I jokingly told some of the guys that I probably should have warmed up with the women. Ironically, this was likely true as I was first to the deadlift for the men's flight. I probably shouldn't have been, but I'll share why in a moment. As I stood ready to take the platform for my opener, I watched the strongest female make her final attempt, and it was a bit humbling to see them unload plates for me. When I saw that female and her mother after the event, I joked to her that she made me look bad by going right before me, and I congratulated her on a great showing. So why do I think I shouldn't have been first for the male deadlifts? That's my next takeaway, and that is checking your ego. It turns out some of the young men overestimated their deadlift strength and ended up bombing out because they were unable to make any of their attempts. They opened up too heavily and they ended up with a DQ and 0 points earned. You should really have a good and honest understanding of where your lifts are and not take guesses at it or be overly optimistic. It's one thing to want to hit an all-time PR on the platform and another being smart enough to attempt that PR for your third and final attempt. I think it is especially true for first-time competitors who have yet to experience competition and its demands. Experience is one contributor, but so is maturity. Some individuals bombed out of the first lift too. Sure, some days you have it and some days you don't, but first attempts should be a sure thing. As Brandon said, the kind of weight you could hit for 3 reps on a bad day. As much as I wanted to best my bench PR from 2022, I knew that wasn't realistic, even for a third attempt this time around. The last few weeks of training should be a real indication of where your lift attempt should be. You can easily adjust on the go if you see your first attempts move super easy, but get those in the bag so as not to bomb out. My next takeaway was knowing your kilo conversions if you're used to lifting in pounds. Better yet, use a spreadsheet like the one from the TSA or an app like Iron Plus to take the guesswork out of it. You need to be sure and efficient with warm-ups to not impede the other competitors' warm-up progress while you figure it out. Also be sure of your rack heights and how to adjust the racks. This was my first time using a competition rack and I didn't know how to adjust the height until some finagling. Another takeaway was to manage your energy and food intake appropriately. After weigh-in, you can consume a high-carb meal to fuel your first lifts, but you must continue feeding yourself and refueling throughout the day. I packed adequate food, snacks, beverages, and even pre-workout, but failed to time it all appropriately. After missing my final bench attempt, I sat near my bag and thought about the failed lift. I then shook it off and grabbed my phone to mentally prepare for my deadlift warm-ups. That's when I noticed the time. It was 2:38 p.m. I hadn't eaten my packed lunch. Normally I've eaten lunch by around 12:30 or 1 p.m. and will have also had a protein shake before that. I had breakfast, snacked on trail mix, took my pre-workout hours earlier, and snacked on some Sour Patch Kids, but hadn't had my high-carb lunch. It made me wonder if the lack of a meal and fuel contributed to that missed bench press. As I said previously, it's a lot to manage, especially for initial competition. Now, before moving on to my final takeaways, I want to highlight another home gym enthusiast by the name of Mitch Schneider. Mitch Schneider is also known as Garage Gym Goon on Instagram, and he recently competed himself, putting together a really great performance at his meet. Mitch grinded out a final attempt on squats at 474 pounds with a rightfully enthusiastic celebration at the end. He matched his previous PR of 292 pounds on bench press and had a really smooth pull of a third deadlift attempt at 540 pounds. Please consider following Mitch on Instagram at Garage Gym Goon. Another takeaway was to ensure you are adequately warmed up and you work on any mobility exercises to prevent any issues or ailments that could interfere with your best performance. A young man I met hurt his back on squats, so I lent him my Hypervolt percussion gun. Unfortunately, it didn't help him enough to have a good deadlift session as he failed his last 2 attempts. Realize you're putting yourself through the ultimate test of your strength, and you're asking a lot from your body. Take the time to optimize your body's movements so that you're at your peak. Another takeaway is to expect the unexpected, and also don't expect too much. As much as you plan, anything can happen and surprise you. I was almost a no-show for my first lift by not knowing my lift order and when to line up for it. Davion from 777 Barbell also mistimed his bench warm-up and failed his opener. It was easy his second time around because he was then prepared adequately. Also, you may have hit a PR recently, but that doesn't mean it's in the bag on meet day. Your nerves could get the best of you. You may not have slept well. Perhaps you haven't eaten a surplus of calories to fuel the day. Maybe a muscle feels tight and it messes with your head. Take nothing for granted. It counts when the judge says it does and not a moment sooner. Another surprising takeaway was that strength is popular. Men and women of all ages compete, and most all of them are strong. Young adults in their early 20s are lifting massive amounts these days, and it is quite impressive to see. Don't judge a book by its cover and think that petite female isn't going to lift much, because they're the ones that will surprise you the most. Some of them are lifting 2 and 3 times their body weight. Powerlifting has become a popular weightlifting discipline, and more are competing these days. That was one of the really nice parts of this experience for me, seeing such a diverse body of competitors all trying to prove their worth. The friendliness of competitors was another takeaway. Doesn't matter the age, everyone cheers on everyone. Some had only learned my name an hour earlier and were screaming it out as I made my lifts. When you train hard and make yourself vulnerable to the platform, you know the work that goes into it and the challenges we face. So it's easy to cheer on your fellow competitors, knowing they're working to slay their own dragons and set PRs. You may go into it alone, as it is an individual sport, but you quickly feel like part of a team with others around you relating to your battles on the platform and cheering for you to perform your best. Even spectators you don't know cheer for you. And in fact, one gentleman congratulated me by name, and we had never met prior to that. So what was my biggest takeaway from my first meet? Without question, how much fun it was. We typically train for our overall health, and for some, there are specific goals like fixing posture issues or being stronger to make your job easier. However, there is something to be said for choosing to compete and setting that bar high in order to perform your absolute best. This is one of those individual sports that allows anyone to be competitive and test themselves. You don't have to try out or join a league, or it's only available for college athletes or kids. Regardless of age, gender, or actual strength, you can participate. And what a great feeling it is to compete. It had been a long time since I competed, my last time being in the military, and it was entirely exhilarating, and although nerve-wracking at times, it was really quite enjoyable. Being next for a lift, watching the lifter before you while the adrenaline starts to course through your body, then stepping up on the platform in front of a small crowd of strangers and your fellow competitors behind you, all to see what you've got, was fantastic. In fact, almost addictive. As I approached the following weekend from my meet, I couldn't help think how I wished I was competing again that Saturday. I'm psyched about the next one and hope training continues on a positive trend so as to elevate my numbers all around. So if you're on the fence about competing, I say just go for it. What have you got to lose? You'll push yourself like you've never done before, and you'll have a great time putting it all out on the platform, making friends along the way. Yes, the cost of entry isn't cheap when you factor in the cost of required gear, registration fees, and memberships, but it is definitely worth it, and I think you'll get more out of it than that next barbell purchase you're considering. So, thanks again for following me on this journey and supporting me along the way. I appreciate all of you, and I'll catch you on the next one.